attention, being here now. And we will see through the week, you know, a few things that explain why the mind wanders. So the neuroscience of it, then the psychology of it, which means that how attention can determine how a life is flowing or following. Then we'll be looking at relationships and how presence is love. And we'll talk about daily living. So, how do we escape autopilot? And then looking at more philosophically at why the present moment is the only place where we can actually live or truly live. So, we'll build naturally from the science to application to meaning and and during the course of it we'll also be practicing understanding some mindfulness techniques. So so that's what this week will look like. Now, to just give context to our minds are wandering, and we miss a lot of our lives because mm, we are not here. And lots of books, lots of quotations, lots of spiritual gurus have spoken about, how we can bring back the mind, or why it's important to bring back the mind. And we've all had this experience. We are, say, at dinner with someone. It's a person we love, we care for, and they're talking about maybe something important to them, but we are somewhere else. We could be planning tomorrow. We could be replaying a conversation from earlier, thinking about work, thinking about something completely different. Or we could be, composing a reply in our head. And we come back suddenly and realize we've missed something. And and it's not hard to figure out that we are not present. So the person across from us can feel the pang of that. And the sad thing is that it's not like we don't care. The mind simply has a habit of wandering, and we just don't know how to manage it. So that's the way the mind has been working and wandering. And to start with, I'd just like you to think about, taking a minute to think about the last meal that you had, and where were you mentally during your last meal? Were you tasting your food, or were you thinking about something else, maybe work, past, future, planning, or you were on your phone, you were watching something, you were talking? Yeah, thinking about that meal, the last meal you had. Where were you? And this is just to sort of cultivate awareness. We're not trying to judge ourselves. And then, thinking about when was the last time you drove somewhere and you realize that you remember nothing about the journey. And there are lots of questions like that I can ask. You finished, say, reading a chapter of a book, and you realized you hadn't absorbed a single sentence, or you had to ask someone to repeat themselves because what they just said, you couldn't get it because your mind had wandered. And and more often than not, it's not because we're lazy or careless or that something is wrong. It's just because we have untrained minds that naturally behave like that. The mind is known as the monkey mind. That's an analogy we use for the mind um, because the mind's chatter doesn't stop. Um, it doesn't use as much discretion. It just works on autopilot, and it works out of habit, where the mind is everywhere. And that's a beautiful quote. It says, "Be where your feet are." So the body, we know it has an address, but the mind could be anywhere. Um, so we'll start, with just a short grounding practice to bring ourselves into this session. And I invite you to sit comfortably and close your eyes. And feel your body being supported by the surface you're sitting on. Taking a few slow breaths, deep breaths. And then notice any 5 sounds around you, distant or near. The sound of my voice is one of them. Noticing just any 5 sounds. Noticing the feeling of your clothes on the skin. The temperature of the room. Noticing the weight of the body. And now simply noticing the breath entering and the breath leaving. Keeping your attention on your breath, staying with the breath as it enters, and staying with the breath as it leaves the body. And if the mind has wandered, then noticing where it went. So, did it go in the past or the future? Did it start planning, reminiscing, judging, imagining, giving whatever thought arises a label and then gently returning to the breath, not criticizing, just returning simply to the breath. And again, if the mind has started wandering, then checking where did it go, past, future, worrying, planning, imagining, reminiscing, giving it the right label, and returning to the breath. And we're simply just starting to observe this nature of the mind where it's so hard for it to stay. And it keeps replaying the same thoughts, the same scenarios, the same worries, the same emotions over and over and over again. And we'll also notice that some thoughts are very sticky. So there are some um, routes that the brain takes that are very attractive to our minds. It loves thinking about those things, and they might not always be pleasant things. But somehow, by habit, our minds become attuned to just going on those same routes. If the mind is, say, prone to worrying, it will find something to worry about. And with that, just taking 3 deep breaths. And then slowly and gently opening your eyes. So, even, what we saw and what we practiced just now, even for the mind to stay present for a minute until, we really trained it, can be really hard. Now, the mind travels constantly. Again, the body has only one place, one address, but we can take the mind anywhere. 5 years ago, 20 years in the future, um, imagining conversations that have never happened. And imagination can serve us, a great deal. It's a great skill we have. But but the sad thing is that how much time can we spend, in being elsewhere, and how much life do we miss when we do that? So we also know that um, our suffering, it's not really happening in the present moment. Most of our suffering is happening in our relationship with the past or the future. So most suffering arises because we are either thinking about things that have happened in the past, or we are worrying about the future. And there was a study which was very interesting. So some Harvard scientists, they tracked about 2,250 people at random moments of their day. So all of these people, they were asked 2 questions. One, what are you thinking about right now? And the second, how happy are you? What are you thinking about right now? How happy are you? These people at random points in their day had to stop and answer these 2 questions. And the result really surprised everyone. Now, they found that the human mind wanders nearly half of all waking hours. So, if we are spending 16 hours awake, 8 hours out of that, the mind is wandering elsewhere. But the more important part is that regardless of what people were doing, mind wandering was consistently associated with lower happiness than being present. So, what this means is, or what it showed was that, say, there were people who were doing very ordinary things or even mildly unpleasant things, but their minds were present with what they were actually doing. They were happier than people who could be doing whatever they were doing, but their minds were elsewhere. So it shows us that presence, it's not just something, we talk about as a meditation activity, or, as a spiritual activity. It's a direct route to experiencing your actual life and feeling happier. And I think, when I first read about that study, it's very interesting because we think that, only if we sometimes we think that only if I was doing something else I'd be happier. But the problem is not that. The problem is that the mind is not rooted into our reality, and when it uses any escape from its reality is when it doesn't feel that great. Now, why does the mind wander? So this is some, neuroscience which can be understood as the default mode network. Now, imagine that the brain has two broad modes. One is of focused attention, and the second is of background thinking. So when we are not completely engaged with what we are doing or what's in front of us or who's in front of us, the brain activates something called the default mode network or the DMN. So when this network gets activated, the brain begins asking questions like, what happened yesterday? What if this goes wrong? What does he think of me? Did I say the wrong thing? What should I do next week? What if, what if, what if? And this network is useful in some ways because it helps us to reflect, to learn, to plan, to be creative. But when it becomes the brain's default setting, it can also keep us caught a lot in worry, in rumination, and in absence from the present. So, what happens then is that worrying or rumination starts becoming the default mode in which we operate because we are not really engaged with the reality of our lives. We are not really engaged with what we are doing, but the brain needs to keep itself occupied. So it moves to thinking about other things. The solution then is to, as much as we can, keep ourselves in the present moment. And we'll see how we can do that through different exercises. But this is the neuroscience behind it, that is why it happens. And even, if we think about experiences, we imagine like we're watching the most beautiful sunset, but while watching the mind starts thinking, oh, I should take a picture. Or oh, I forgot to answer that email. I wonder if it'll rain tomorrow and if I can't do this again. You know, the moment is past, the sunset is finished. Now you were there technically, but did you experience it? Not really. And this is one of the great paradoxes of modern life because we are almost thinking about life much more than we are actually living life. Now, we've seen this, last week as well, and we've learned, understood about how attention can help us feel more positive emotions and how attention on the positive aspects of life and the positive aspects of ourselves can make us sustainably feel more joy. Um, it sort of tells us that attention is the currency of life. Now, if someone is stealing, say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes of our life, it's the only thing we have, our time, our attention. So we ourselves are spending a lot of that currency mostly through distraction, and we don't even notice. So, telling this to ourselves and like reinforcing it to ourselves that attention is our most valuable currency because wherever our attention is going, our life is flowing like that. We don't remember every day that we've lived in our life so far, but we remember the moments we've paid attention to. So then again, what is it that we are paying attention to? Because that in the end is our life. Okay. Is there anything else? Mm, Now, yeah. One more thing is that we've been told, and meditation, as we know, is one of the ways, one of the practices in which we can contain our attention, and in which we can, stay focused, train our minds for more focus. And meditation can be of many forms. So, depending on what our relationship is to meditation or what our relationship is to our current circumstances, our current state of mind, we will. We can find a practice that suits us more than the others. There is breath meditation, there is sound meditation, mm, there is loving kindness, so many different forms. And we don't have to practice, one set way. Um, so at the same time, we could think I cannot meditate or it's not for me. Now, when someone says I can't meditate, what they really mean is that my mind keeps wandering. So, I can't meditate because my mind is not present with me. Now, if someone says, I can't go to the gym because I'm not fit, what would you say? The gym is a place you go to get fit, right? So the wandering mind should not be a deterrent for us to meditate. If we have a wandering mind, it's the reason we should meditate. So every time we notice that the mind is wandering and we return, we are strengthening our attention. No, we do bicep curls, we lift, we lower, we lift. Nobody says my arm keeps going down or I can't keep, it up for whatever, like 30 minutes. That's the exercise. So again, with mindfulness, it's wander. Mind wanders, you notice, you return. Again, the mind wanders, you notice and you return. That is mindfulness. It does not mean that your mind will never wander. It means that you notice the moment when it starts happening, and then you can train the mind to keep coming back. Every return that we practice strengthens our focus. So, any myths that we have, that it's a that we can only do it if we are peaceful. We need to have an empty mind. We need to sit in a specific way for a specific amount of time. Um, it's not that. It's just about noticing when your mind is wandered, and that is the entire practice. The noticing is the rep. You know, the more times we notice and return, the stronger this present circuit becomes. We can do it anywhere. We can do it with any activity. So, we could think that it's only when I sit on a cushion and I meditate is when I'm doing it right. We can do it while washing dishes. We can do it while, eating a meal. Um, and and the crux of it is that we are engaged with the present moment. In the present moment, if I am washing dishes, that's what I am doing. We can do that in a conversation. So rather than switching on and off and going in and out of the conversation, if we can bring all of our presence, we are training the mind to stay present. And yeah, that's all actually I had to share today. Now, I will just look at there are any questions. Yeah, so I'll just read this out. So, actually, living the mindfulness definition is key. Mindfulness is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we are doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. It involves paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. Yeah, Vardini is saying that. Thanks a lot, Martina. This is beautifully shared. I'll just read it out again. You've written it so nicely. She's saying, so actually living the mindfulness definition is key. Mindfulness is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we are doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. It involves paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then, yeah, Bilasha saying, yes, ma'am, it happens whenever I try to meditate. I'm not able to do, several thoughts will come. And yes, several thoughts will come. But as we are now seeing that the purpose of meditation, of mindfulness, is not to eliminate thoughts, it's to notice. Okay, we could, and sometimes we could have spent a whole minute thinking and not realized it, and that's fine. When you catch yourself thinking, oh, I was thinking, and you bring yourself back to your breath or to the object of your focus, in your practice, is practicing rightly. So not feeling like you're not doing something right or you can't meditate, it's not for you. It's just training yourself to notice and having the the ability to one more time anchor yourself in the object of your attention. So yeah, that was all I had to share today. As a practice, what we can do for some time, maybe this week, is to maybe set a timer of 3 minutes And in those 3 minutes, you can focus on anything. You can focus on your breath. You can focus on noticing the sounds around you with eyes closed and moving your awareness from one sound to the other. You can focus on looking at, say, an object. So anything that's pleasing to the eye, if it's say, a flower, candle, and just looking at that. So finding any anchor where you can place your mind and trying to bring your mind back every time it loses attention or loses focus, and see how that practices. It might be different on different days. In fact, it will be different on different days because, there are days the mind is racier. There are days we are perhaps, more caught up in daily life than others. But when we do this as a practice every day, we might start noticing some change in how we deal with the distractions that come to the mind. So, so yeah, I will leave you here, and just again, just thinking about the fact that it's engagement with our present moment that creates the most fulfillment and happiness for us. So we might think that if I distract myself, I will escape this. And it can be sometimes difficult to sit with uncomfortable situations, feelings, thoughts. But the more we train ourselves to keep ourselves present with whatever is happening, we realize that the happier we are. So thank you. Thanks everyone for being here, for practicing together, for your time. And tomorrow we'll go deeper into this topic, and we'll be practicing some techniques to be present. So see you all tomorrow, and have a good day, have a good evening, wherever you are.